Good afternoon. I am very pleased to welcome Dr. David Maslach, founder and professor. So he wears two hats, a founder hat and a professor hat. Dr. Maslach has an undergraduate degree in chemical engineering from University of Waterloo, master's in management science from the same university, and a PhD degree from Western University in Canada. I invited Dr. Maslach to visit with you to share his experiences starting and running a platform-based business, R3ciprocity. Dr. Maslach, welcome and thank you for taking the time to visit with our students today.
Yeah, this is an absolute joy. Thank you, Professor Gupta. I do appreciate the fact that you reached out to me, and I'm assuming we're like-minded in many of the things that we actually teach. So I teach some of the similar ideas that Professor Gupta teaches.
Wonderful. Now, as I mentioned to you before this call, we are going to ask you to wear your founder hat for the much of the or largely the full interview. So can you tell us a little bit about your business? What exactly is your business? These students have been told nothing about your business. So can you explain it to a lay audience?
Yeah, so fundamentally, it is to help researchers do work more easily. And the story, it's easier if I sort of put this within a story. So I started out my assistant professorship at my institution. I was about 2 years into it, and I went to my department chair and I said, hey, can I get some help with, can I get some funding for editorial work on a research paper that I was writing? And the answer, being at a state institution that's good with their money, they said no. Which, they were being fiscally responsible. And so I thought, being an entrepreneur, I actually was driving home from Disney after that. It kind of stewed with me for a bit. And being a professor in this area and, having engineering degrees and, learning about entrepreneurship and innovation, as I was driving home, I was like, nobody else is going to do this. Nobody else is going to fix this problem. And I thought, why don't I be the one that does this? I mean, even within our field of, within the academic community, research community, there's not a lot of people that would be willing to sort of stick their neck out and do something like this. And I was like, well, I'm uniquely positioned. I don't know who else would do this and be like so foolish. And so I thought, okay, I could build a platform where it would be based on, first of all, I thought it would be generalized reciprocity. So it's this idea that you would help out. So in online research, in a lot of the tech research, there's general idea why people participate online is they just want to help other people out. And they don't know who these people are. And so I thought, why don't I mimic something like that? Why don't I mimic the story of, if I could build a platform that we can put credits behind why people actually do this, like, imaginary credits, like a computer game, where if people help out other people and help out with their research, then we could create a platform where it would incentivize people to do well. And then it would also reach targeted audiences where people wouldn't normally do research and wouldn't normally participate. So I was always thinking about this problem. My mom, I came up, there was no academics in my family, no researchers or anything like that. My mom would help me out. She finished high school when I was finishing university. So that was the sort of extent of it. Came from a large family in a small town. That was not a thing to go to away to university. So I finished, I went to the University of Waterloo. She finished this, but a lot of she finished her high school. A lot of the times where I was writing things, I struggled with writing a lot. Later on, I found out I had ADHD, which sort of explained a lot of like, why is this so hard? I would actually get my mom to help me out. And no, she's not a researcher in any sort of way, but I knew that there would be people that would want to participate, that I wouldn't know who those people are. And so I wanted to be welcoming and open, and make a platform where it was just like anybody can participate at any level. And by the time that you work on, you submit your paper and your work, by the time that it goes through a bunch of different checks and balances, um, combined with machines and processing and all this kind of stuff, that you would have a decent paper at the end of it. That's the vision, is how can I create a platform that's going to be fun and exciting and goofy and silly, that people would go on to it from all walks of life, and it would help out with the research process, where somebody, if they wanted to, like, there's great examples out there that I was inspired by, one of them being Duolingo, where you're learning a language that is not fun, where you can enter into it and have fun and find it very exciting. At the end of it, you actually have a decent working paper that I could be proud of. And that's kind of the basic idea behind it, is how do we not only incentivize people using generalized reciprocity, but also use machines and various available tools that we have access to now with AI, to create a nice workable paper at the end of it. And it's been a journey doing it, and I could talk all about that as well.
And of course, today we are here to talk about that journey and learn from your experience. In the class, we talked about part-time entrepreneurship. And we
Mhm.
said, look at people like Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. He started part-time, and we use several examples for part-time entrepreneurship. You are doing part-time entrepreneurship. What are the challenges?
Oh my gosh. There was so many that I could talk about. One of the biggest ones, and I'm very cognizant of it right from the get-go. I actually wanted to work with my university, and I understand why their position was the way that they sort of positioned it. The institution I'm at, large institutions, they like to have pre-packaged intellectual property in the form of patents. So at my institution, which is actually I think it is the leading patenting institution in the United States, they deal with a lot of pharmaceuticals. And so their language and how they deal with things is often with patenting pharmaceuticals and derivatives. There was a famous pharmaceutical cancer drug that was derived here, and then they've been patenting ever since from then. So when I went to the commercialization office, they were not necessarily enthusiastic about building a platform or software, because it's hard to patent and it's very loose. Like there's a lot of looseness with software because it's always evolving. So they basically, they said, "Oh, go on your very old way, but as long as carve out that there's no conflicts of interest, or you're very cognizant of that." I'm very cognizant of that. Um, that that you're not intruding on issues with, this is your job at the university and this is your job at home. So this is kind of an odd day for me. I'm actually doing this during the afternoon, but most of my day from 9 to 5 is doing research as best I can. And so what I am doing is doing this in between the hours of 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. in the morning. Essentially, that's essentially it. So you'll see a lot of things. I'm doing things like post a lot of marketing, and I could talk about that in terms of an important thing. My view on entrepreneurship has completely changed now that I've done this. But a lot of things on marketing with social platforms, um, and as well as in contacting. I ended up having a development team, because I was like, okay, I can't build this here. I tried to build the team here, it fell apart. So I got a development team of all places, eventually on Upwork, on out of the Ukraine, and they built the basics of it, and then it fell apart. And that team just kind of ran off. um, and so I was stuck doing this. I was like, okay, I can't find a team here. It's hard to find a team anywhere. So where do I go? I had to go and look on Upwork. I found another team out of India, and I'm funding this all myself. Like the whole thing is me and my wife. Thankfully, my wife works too. Um, it's because like it's hard to find funding in the sense because I'm kind of in between a lot of ways, right? So it's challenging with the university. It's challenging because I would be considered not serious because I'm doing this from 5 to 9 instead of 9 to 5. So and frankly, I don't want to. I have a great profession that I'm kind of excelling at, so I don't want to lose that at this moment. So there is this, it's a lot of challenges with identity that you go through, and you will understand that you wish that you could do better in a lot of different ways, but you do the best that you possibly can given the resources that you actually have. And often it's really inferior. A lot of you will go onto the platform. I've had this a lot. Was like, well, this is crappy, like this is the best. Yes, it's the best I could do with the resources I have on hand. And I wish I could do better. But, when you're competing against Google and Facebook that have millions of dollars of budgets from with the best developers in the world, I have to figure out how to make this work on a very shoestring budget and do it on off time, which is a very different conversation than a lot of people talk about and would actually view. But I think it's actually more the normal entrepreneurship story that a lot of people go through. And we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. But let me make clear to the students a few things here. First is Dr. Maslach is on the faculty at Florida State University. He teaches some of the same things I do, like entrepreneurship, innovation, and this is the business he's doing 5 to 9, as he likes to say, after he's done his day job as a professor, which itself is hectic, right? So that's one thing. Second, I would also like to let the students know that Dr. Maslach is very, very particular about keeping the two things separate. So much so that when I suggested to him that he could Zoom with us from his office, he didn't even want to do that. He said, this is my business. I'm going to do this not from the office, which is where I work. So, that shows you how particular he is at keeping these two things separate. But Dave, let me get back to this idea. When you first started telling people or mentioning to people that you want to start a business, what was the reaction of people around you, both professional friends and family, personal friends? I'm assuming a lot of faculty were not very excited about what you told them. But tell us what the reaction was.
Yeah, so it's weird, is what I'm going to say. So at the administrative level, they were kind of excited because I think a lot of universities want entrepreneurship and innovation, but they really often don't want it because it comes at a cost. So what our main job is as professors is doing research, and research is often very intensive, and we write a lot. And so there's this view that you're not a serious scholar if you have, and I know that sounds class, I know that sounds crazy, but this is literally, this is the logic within, the tenured system. And most people that you talk to, that is a senior professor that have done this for a long time, they're going to say it's silly, but this is the system we live within. So even though I teach innovation and entrepreneurship, and courses like that, the strategy, it is frowned upon quite a bit. And so there is a lot of reconciling with myself in terms of how I feel about this and what it means to do something like this when I'm doing something that is considered illegitimate in the profession, even though it's so closely tied to the profession. I wanted to solve a problem that we experience. And all of us most of us will say, hey, this process is really hard. Writing a research paper is really hard, is really lonely, and there's very little feedback. it's a painful process, but to fix it and to do things that are different, a lot of people would. I would have a harder time getting a job now because I'm doing this often the case. Unless there are people that really recognize the value in doing it, but it's hard to recognize that when you um, I'm not working with large, I'm not working with Google and Microsoft and all those kind of things. I'm doing this on myself. So when people look at it, they're like, oh, what is this person doing? He's, wasting his time from 9 to 5. So dealing with that internal struggle that you would go through, and I don't think that this would happen in a large, if you're working for a large company as well, or even a small company where you're thinking of doing things on the side. You have to think about how is it that other people are going to view me and how I'm going to deal with this. Now, thankfully, my institution has been indifferent, I guess, is the sort of, I wouldn't say that they're like jumping for joy, but I think that they try to look the other way because they sort of view this as an intellectual pursuit. But in the marketplace, does that mean that this would be recognized in many other institutions? I don't think so. And that is a challenging thing that you reconcile in your head. You're thinking, I'm doing this all wrong. I feel ashamed a lot of times. Um, I feel like if I get people to pay for this, I feel like I'm ripping them off. Like, um, all of those emotions that you would feel in terms of these identities of who you actually are, very much come out when you do something like this.
And David, in 2012, when I co-founded a business as a faculty member, I did not tell even a single soul at my workplace about what I was doing outside, in my outside time. Now I'm at a different stage in my career. So now if I start a business, I'll let people know. But back then, because of the reasons you mentioned, people frown upon it in our profession. They think you are not serious about what you're doing 9 to 5, and they sort of discount you. Um,
Hmm.
and uh, so my point was, why even go tell them? But so when I saw your post on LinkedIn sharing about this business, I was like, here's a brave person I want to have talk to my students, somebody who's ready to admit this. So thank you for talking to us. But
Thank you.
let's go back to your early life. Uh, you grew up in Canada. Uh,
Hmm.
Tell us about how life was growing up, family, community, school. Were they into entrepreneurship? Where did you get this entrepreneurship bug?
I'm thankfully you raised that because it's actually really close to home in terms of how I view myself. Is that I actually grew up in a family, had a big family. There was 5 kids. My dad worked at a mill, pulp and paper mill in rural Ontario. So if you were to give you a picture, I know nobody really understands where this is, but if you went directly due north to Minnesota and you went to Minneapolis and you drove 8 hours north, and there's this little town that's got 6,000 people in it, and we were the biggest town for 4 hour drive in any direction. So we were the metropolis with 6,000 people. Um, and in the town, we weren't really all that entrepreneurial. I look back and I think what we had to do was more necessity. So so my dad was an immigrant from Poland. He escaped Nazi German or Poland just before it got real bad. They come over, and there was this thing called homesteading in Canada. And what you would do is you would get a little bit of property from the Canadian government and clear the land, and then whatever you can clear, you can own. And so they did that off of one of the railways in the middle of nowhere. And how they survived, my dad said, and it's very cold, brutally cold up there, -40, for a month or two. Like it's very cold. And my dad, I remember him telling stories how there would be holes in the walls because they built the shack, and there would be holes in the walls, and the wind would be blowing through, like 1 inch gaps in the walls, and the wind would be blowing through, and they'd be huddled together with this. They had a large family at the time, and in this little shack that they were living in. But he told me all the time how brutal it was, and how they actually raised money was they would go to the railway, stop the railway, and sell them blueberries in the summertime. So they were pawning blueberries, buckets of blueberries, to all of the passengers as they were going by. Um, and that's how they survived. It was very subsistence. And so that logic was built into my dad. And everything that we did at our place was we fixed it and built it ourselves. Everything was just fixed and built. Like, he did everything. He did all of that stuff. And so with my family, that was very much built into it. I was the first of 100 people to go to Wade University, much less become a professor. And we very much I internalized, not necessarily entrepreneurship, because I wouldn't have called it that, and sort of the business side of things. I just internalized, you make it do, you make it happen, right? No matter how embarrassing it is to walk up to a train and stop a train and sell them blueberries, you make it happen. And that's what I view it more as, is we're just problem solving. There is this legitimate problem in this world. In my view, uh, writing research papers is really hard, and it's not fun. That's why a lot of people don't do it. And we can legitimately change this as a serious problem, and view it as a serious problem, where there's lots of um, there's a tremendous amount of mental health problems that are with PhDs, and it's largely because of the problem of how challenging that this can be. And so I recognize it. This is my stopping somebody on the train, and saying, "Hey, here's some blueberries. See what you think about it."
Okay. And David, when parents have the kind of background your parents had, for them, entrepreneurship becomes sort of associated with necessity. So oftentimes they don't see the glamour in entrepreneurship. They want their next generation to have a stable job, a good, a job at a company or an organization where they can get the reputation because of the reputation of the organization, right? PwC, Google, whatever, right? Whatever those names are. So how did your parents see entrepreneurship? And
So
yeah,
okay. So my dad, to give you sort of a case on what Professor Ghoshal is, or Gupta is saying, is when I went to university, my dad was mad at me. I went to the top engineering program in the country, and my dad was mad at me because he viewed getting an education was a waste of time. He wanted me to go work in the pulp and paper mill, and have a stable job, where he worked there for 40 years. And I'm very proud of that, but I distinctly remember this, and I had to work a lot, and very, very much so, to get into the university to sort of prove myself. And so it was really, education meant a lot to me, like a tremendous amount. And entrepreneurship, if you weren't working at the mill, it would be almost highly stigmatized to go and to build a business in my family. Um, and I recognize now, it seems like, oh, this is, it's really kind of funny to think about that. But it would have been in the sense that we view it today, where you go to the Silicon Valley thing, and you go build a business with a bunch of venture capital. That would have been highly stigmatized. What would have been, and still today in my family with most of them, if you're working with your hands, if you are a plumber, if you are a hairdresser, those kind of things, those are legitimate businesses. That's legitimate entrepreneurship. And this stuff that we see of people going to Boston or San Francisco, that's for the rich people, that's for the elites. And that's deeply ingrained in who I am. So it's really funny that you said that, because I still have this identity of myself as I'm just a blue collar worker, doing my thing.
It's funny you say that, David, because that's how I see myself. In a previous life, I was, working on the factory floor in the family business, and I still to this day think of myself as a blue collared who's better working with his hands, although I do nothing with my hands anymore. But yeah, that's sort of my identity in my head. But David, you teach now in a university like Alabama, right? Florida State. Your students are probably like the kind of students we get here. They may not be very familiar with Canada or how life is in Canada. So could you talk to them about how uh, the Canadian culture sees entrepreneurship in general? The kind of the culture where you grew up?
Yeah, so in general, I think today, so when I grew up was different. Things have changed a lot, and same in America, things have changed a lot. You can imagine it more being, and particularly the town I grew up was probably more like growing up in Pittsburgh, like a small factory town, steel town. Um, and so entrepreneurship would have been the entrepreneurship that people would have considered as profitable would have been having a car dealership. Um, and anything that differed from that, the sort of way that we view it today as, hey, you could just hop online, or you can go onto YouTube and start being like acting goofy and making all these videos and all that. That's not what entrepreneurship was growing up. And Canada tends to be similar to the United States in a lot of respects, but it tends to be almost always slightly more conservative, in the sense that there is more, it's less risk seeking there in general, just a little bit, just a hair, but it definitely is. There's less embracing of some of these things, but the entrepreneurs that I grew up with, or people that would have done that, they were doing home businesses, which is probably very similar to what it's like in Alabama. Somebody, their parents had a cleaning service. They were cleaning mats. Um, you know, uh, there was somebody that owned the car dealership in town, and those kind of things, which if you're to read about a lot of those things in business school, where they would not be talked about a lot, which is really fascinating.
And even part-time entrepreneurship, to be honest, is not much talked about in the business school. I would
Mhm.
venture to say that our 386 is probably the only class where the students really get to hear anything about part-time entrepreneurship at all. Uh, so you said you were an engineering major. What was the position of entrepreneurship in your engineering curriculum? Did you guys get exposure to entrepreneurship? Was it discussed, or was it assumed that people will graduate, get a job at a large firm, and that's sort of the career path?
So it was going through this weird transition. The University of Waterloo was blue collar for a while. It was an engineering school. For those of you who don't know, it's equivalent to a Caltech, MIT, those kind of schools like that, where there's a real tech emphasis. And so actually a lot at the time when I got there was this little startup that nobody heard about that was asking to get people to work there. The reason why people go there is they have this really great co-op program where you work for 4 months and then you go to school for 4 months. It takes an extra year longer, but you have like 2.5 years of working experience at the end, which is really valuable. So there was this little tiny company that nobody had heard about, and there was a couple of people that were working there. It was called the Research in Motion, um, which for those of you, I know this is a little later, when it was just starting, but Research in Motion was the first smartphone, and it really took off. and essentially the whole town was research in motion for a long time, and it created this very entrepreneurial ecosystem that was there, that was part of some of them. But there was no formal entrepreneurship education at the time. It was still, we're going through this transition about 15 to 20 years ago, where entrepreneurship was still considered fairly illegitimate, much more so than what it is today. And so this has changed in they have a strong, much stronger entrepreneurial ecosystem, but it was always most people would want to go to the stable jobs, but there was just the beginning, and with the research in motion and several other Nortel networks was really growing at the time. They created the routers for the internet. At the time, there was an internet boom. Um, there was some people doing those particular kind of jobs and going into them. So there was discussion because it was a tech hub of these kind of jobs, but it's not the entrepreneurship that you think of today that you see on TV. It was very much very nerdy software development kind of stuff, doing the back end heavy lifting of the internet that nobody even knows about today. Those kind of jobs like that. That is the thing that was driving entrepreneurship.
Okay, so that's the environment within which you went to college.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit about your journey from that David, who studied in that environment, to how your career shaped up, or how your choices, what are the choices you made next? Where did you work?
Yeah.
What did you go to school after that? Things like
Yeah, I was always pulled towards research. I think it is interesting. And so I did, a lot of research in on my undergrad. Actually, that was a lot of my co-op. The co-op is internships. All of my internships were within R&D companies that did software development in R&D companies, and they did exactly. And there was lots of PhDs there. In fact, there was one that I roommated with for a summer, and he was a PhD, and I was like, "Oh, PhD, that's an interesting thing." So I went because I had this happenstance, chance of somebody doing that. I was like, "Oh, I'll apply to a PhD program," because I thought I would become a consultant, a business consultant. So I applied to the best business school that I knew of at the time in Canada, or one of them. I like to say it's the best, but there's all these silly ratings. Um, so I got into the business program, and I thought I would become a consultant at the end of it, management consultant. And I thought, hey, this would be a lucrative, great career, because I was always career oriented growing up. Probably more on the lower end of the blue middle class. So I was always career oriented. A lot of ways was really important to me. So I got into business school, and then I had to change my mind in terms of what we actually do. I didn't really kind of understand what we do. And then I got interested in writing research papers. But along the way, when I was doing my PhD, which was a longer journey than most, because what had happened was I was supposed to go in the job market. I was then taking an extra year, because I was encouraged at my institution to take 5 years of work if you can afford to do it, because it would make a better research. And they were right, absolutely. But the year I was supposed to go in the job market was 2008, or 2000, beginning of 2009. So the financial crisis happened. It collapsed. The market for any job collapsed. And I couldn't find a job for 2 years. So I found like various different, for many months, I was not paid. My wife had we had a baby at the time. We had a second one, so we had little kids running around. And my wife was, or she's a veterinarian. So she took some time off, but I was feeling the pressure of, I'm kind of this. I went and did all this education. What the hell is it useful for? What is it good for? I was very much feeling that at that point. And it was a very dark moment, very, very dark moment for me and in my family. And when I got I had a job offer finally. I had a couple of great interviews. Eventually, after a few years of this not having a job and feeling like, what am I doing here? And then I got this job offer, and that was kind of the beginning of me thinking about we can change this market. Um, that was the moment where I was like, man, I'm not the only one that goes through this experience. I'm one of many, many people that go through this experience. And that's what it brought me into about my second year of my assistant professor, second and a half year of my assistant professor gig, of wanting to create this platform to solve this issue. Because one of the things that stuck with me is one of my PhD advisors told me that you want to pay it forward. And that stuck with me a lot, where I want to help out more people, because the conditions can be very difficult. And so if I can normalize and be open about some of these things and make other people feel good, which is part of the reciprocity project now, when we could talk about in a moment. If I can normalize that and say, hey, you're normal, you're totally fine, we're going through this, right? That I can hopefully make other people feel encouraged, and they are not going to give up, and they're going to want to continue on doing the things that we do, which is this gap that is missing in the market right now.
And David, I think this is a good opportunity for us to pivot back to the business. So you saw a problem, you started a business, you were passionate about it, and you were willing to put your own money behind it, you and your wife.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, you did everything that you did things the way we teach in the entrepreneurship class, which is, find a problem that you and others care about, come up with a solution, put the work, be passionate. And yet, you shared with me and the others that the business did not work out as you'd expected. So, what did you expect and how did it work out?
So I thought I would put this out. So I got the development team to put this thing out. And I put this on the internet, and I thought everybody would be excited about it. And I thought, oh, this was going to be the big thing, right? Like, oh my gosh, everybody's going to be jumping for joy. I solved this hard problem that we have. And I put it on the internet, and I got crickets. So people will talk about these crickets where nobody cares. Absolutely nobody cares. And it's a very real experience when you go through it, when you put it out, you work on it, and you're so passionate, and it takes years of work, and you spend all this money. And in fact, it was like, my wife is not technically happy with this. Like, spending money on something like this is like, it's kind of like it's a negotiation. To um, so so I put this out there, and nobody cared, not a single soul. And so I looked at this, and I was like, I am at the time, I'm like, I'm a failure. I screwed this up somehow, and I went and thought about it, and I thought, well, what do I do at this moment? Do I give up? Do I just say, like, this is pathetic? I said, no, that's not what I would do. And a friend of mine, I was having this conversation about, like, hey, I just have these crickets. And he said, well, why don't you just put it on YouTube and start talking about things on YouTube? So I started out in a very dry, very nervous. You can look at some of these older videos, very nervous, very dry person that was talking about what this platform was. I was excited about it, but like super, because I was, young assistant professor before tenure. You don't have a lot of leverage, or any. And so I was really shy about this, and I didn't know what people were going to say. And I started putting out these videos, and then I started Googling online about, what to do to build a platform. And there was some folks on there. I kind of got swindled. I feel I got swindled with a couple of these folks that were saying you just have to do these kind of programmatic things, and then all of a sudden your thing is going to shoot off. So one of these programmatic things was to do, at the time it was like 90 videos or 90 days of videos. And I put this out. I started doing that every single day, putting out videos. But what had happened is at the end of it, nothing had happened, right? Like it wasn't like this shooting up and everybody was excited. But what I had learned was that the videos where I was just being myself, where I was being honest and telling people like, this is actually kind of hard doing a lot of these things, they started getting what's called traction. People start paying attention to them. And over time, I've realized that there is this kind of space where a lot of people feel lost or alone, and we're scared to talk about it, particularly within the academic stuff, or even entrepreneurship stuff. And I'm just out there now. What I'm doing is, and I started going on all these different platforms now. You'll see me on LinkedIn, all these kind of things. What I'm doing is just telling people it'll be okay. And that, yes, their problems are very real, right? Like they're gonna go through all of these things, and people do rip you off, they lie, there's politics and all of those kind of things that are very real that we go through. But I am there to just try to tell people that it's gonna be okay, one day at a time. And if what's the alternative, right? I always think about that. What is the alternative, right? So yeah, I screwed this up. What do I do now? Well, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm do, right? So I try to walk people through and get them to think of that they're going to be okay no matter what happens to them. And I think that there is a need for that at this moment. Of It's not only a technical solution, and we're continuing to build out the platform, but it's very much this. Getting people to believe in themselves a little bit more, I think, is a really, really important thing. And
So
so you'll
as I ask you my next question, could you maybe quickly type in the chat box the website for your for reciprocity, so students
Sure.
know where they can check it out if they want?
Sure. I'm gonna have to turn the screen temporarily so I can type it in because I'm using my phone. It's got a better camera.
Oh, I see. Okay. So in the meantime, let me phrase my next question then. And my question is, it's been a few years now when you started the business. It didn't work out the way you expected. Yes, you're putting online videos and you're sharing on these platforms about it's all right to, not be successful the way you wanted. But there's two issues there. First is that doesn't bring in revenue. So, how do you solve that problem? And second, you have a 9 to 5 job as a faculty, you have a 5 to 9 job as an entrepreneur, and now you have a new job as what the internet shrink or the internet's counselor or the internet,
What it is.
advisor. I mean, can you answer those two questions perhaps? Is how do you see this?
So I don't have a right answer right now. I think the only thing that I can do is that we do collect, statistics and stuff on what is going on with the platform, and it continues to grow. It's not at the pace, the sort of rocket pace that I thought it would be, but it continues to grow, and we're continuing to work on this. So I think what I can do is to continue making it more focused on solving our problems, because I think that's essentially what's going on right now is people just don't see it. They don't believe in it because it's not jumping out at them. And the only thing that you can do is fledge along and put it together the best that you possibly can. I often think about Kenneth Dyson as a role model. Kenneth Dyson created the Dyson vacuum, but a lot of people don't realize that he just put in iteration after iteration after iteration of trying to get this vacuum to work before it even was plausible. Um, and I just think of myself right now is that I just have to iterate as many times, keep working at this, what's called A/B testing, taking out things that maybe are not working, looking at things where people are doing things, and continuously to iterate to where it is becoming something. Now, in terms of my full-time job, this is something I don't know at this moment in terms of what I would do with it. The problem is, and I think a lot of entrepreneurial people go through this, is it's hard to find somebody that's going to be as passionate about it as you are and willing to give all of this sacrifice. Um, so at this moment, I haven't found anybody like that. But if there are people out there that are willing to participate and have fun and realize that it's a grind, then by all means, I would, welcome that kind of participation on it. But when you're doing this, there's often no alternatives. The alternative is shutting it down, which I don't think is legitimate right now with the way that things are changing in the market with artificial intelligence and all of these things that we can leverage. And we still have this problem that do I just give up on this problem where a lot of people are not that they're frustrated with the research process, and yet there's no ways to fix this at this moment. And I think at this moment, the way that I frame it um, is it's more charity and it's more of a hobby at this moment. So it would get me to get through this moment of this sort of dark period where things don't work out as planned, which I think is a normal process with anything that you're building and doing, is that you have to view it as this is just my thing that I do, and it's silly. And I know people are laughing at me. I know it doesn't fit in with what everybody is expecting of me, but this is the best that I can do at this moment, and I think that's all I can do.
David, you started your answer by saying, I don't know. That's what you started here. As you and I are both professors, we stand up in front of 20, 30, 40 students every semester, talk to them about entrepreneurship. Oftentimes it feels like they expect us to know all the answers. And you have had this experience where it's a humbling experience to realize that, you know, I teach entrepreneurship, but it didn't work for me. And I don't have all the answers. Do you think it made you a better teacher or a more balanced teacher of entrepreneurship? How do you think that this experience shaped you as a teacher of entrepreneurship?
Oh my gosh. So I almost and Vishal, I apologize. I know that you're very well written in this area. I don't believe a lot of the research on entrepreneurship anymore. And the reason is that there is a massive sample selection. What's called it for the students, it's a sample selection bias. And what that is the data that we draw upon often is on companies that have already done well. So we either look at companies that are in, they have venture capital funding, or that they have a series of patents, all these kind of things. There is this weird space of people trying to figure things out, and it's hard to get that data. It's very, very hard to get that data because, a lot of the measures that we use for entrepreneurship are thinking about, did they get funding? Well, who's going to fund this? Right? Like, come on. Like that's not going to work. There's lots of things like that. I think about, um, there's work by Eric von Hippel, who's this professor at MIT that studies innovation. He looks at like home innovation, like people doing things in their house, and just kind of building things. And I think about that as I think if you um, know that if you start small and if you have a tiny little problem, I think that's better. And you have a tiny little solution, I think that's better than a lot of those things that we talk about and we discuss. So today, I had students, I talk about entrepreneurship, but I talk about innovation a lot. And one of the practices, and I deviating a little bit, but I have this one class where I get them to go out and I say, hey, go raise $10. Just, you've got all these great ideas, just go get $10. Just go run out of the classroom for 15 minutes, see if you can raise $10. Well, most of the class can't do that. And when they do it, we talk about the feelings that you go through, and a lot of it's not great feelings. And then inevitably, the ones that get funding, and this is good practice for all of you to think about, things that get funding or the things that people will pay for are often really simple. So for example, it might be like going and grabbing a coffee for somebody, washing somebody's car. And there's good reason for that. It's because that's what we can imagine as human beings, but it's also a need that's there. And, looking back in a lot of what I think about and I talk about now, it's a lot more about thinking of what is the need that people have and how can we solve this simply. So in my case, it's very easy now because I've got all these videos and all this kind of content and all this stuff. I just look to see what is doing well and what's not doing well, and I could find out what things are resonating with people. And that's a really important thing. So my conversation is changed where comes across in a different way because it connects with people. And I think like if you do that yourself, if you realize it's not about doing these very sophisticated things, if you could do it by just getting your friends to pay or just repeatedly pay for this thing every week, that is an amazing entrepreneurial venture. And yet we discount that particular thing. So going and cutting somebody's grass and then growing your business into the world's, that was the example, or picking up trash, for example. Waste management was a small company at one point, and that's kind of how they started, was through, they knew that there was a demand for picking up trash. And so my view has become a lot more simplistic, and really a lot more humbling, a lot more humble today than I ever used to be.
David, as I hear you speak, I'm thinking, maybe it's our similar blue-collar background, or perhaps perhaps a similar humbling experience we've had in terms of founding businesses. But we both, it seems, reached the same conclusion that not the fancy entrepreneurship, but it's entrepreneurship in the simpler things that we should focus on. And even in the class, we were talking about $10 businesses recently, and you mentioned the $10 in terms of raising investment and all that. So it's fascinating to me how we seem to have reached similar conclusions on our own different journeys. But at this point, let me invite the students to ask any questions if they want to raise their hand or if they want to unmute themselves. Please feel free to ask any questions you might have. As we wait on the students to ask a question, David, if I understand correctly, the business is still not breaking even.
No, but it's
still investing in the business. So
I'm
what's
still investing. It's actually providing a little bit more revenue than it did because I'm getting traction online. So it's still not breaking even by any means. The actual platform itself is not. Some people are paying for it, not a lot. Not a lot meaning like every couple months of people will pay to use it, but people are going on it. There's well over 4,000 users now, which for a platform is actually, it's not big, but it's growing. And on my online presence, millions and millions of people have seen me now making a complete fool of myself.
So what's the future, David, of this business? Like, do you continue to see yourself putting in money? Is your
I
wife
think,
okay with you continuing to plow family money into the business? I mean, I'm just thinking my wife would have, by now probably shown me the door, so to speak.
yeah, no, I know. I honestly, thank God she says everybody needs a hobby. So,
It's better than
um,
other hobbies, I guess.
yeah, there's worse hobbies that one could do at this moment. So I honestly don't know with it. If there was probably an exit with the platform, I'd consider it a realistic exit. But I don't know. I don't know. What did you do? Did you just shut down?
I shut down that business.
Yeah.
I'm in the process of working out the next business, but that business I shut down. It was a partnership with someone. Thankfully, they decided to shut it down, which made the decision easier for me. The partner was ready to shut down or sell out their share.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh,
Well, it's one of these things. If I'm always looking for people that are interested and willing and all that kind of stuff. So if anybody's out there,
so
and that
David,
includes.
as entrepreneurship professors and as strategy professors, we teach about escalation of commitment, right?
Oh, I know. Tell me
So
about
how
it.
do you know that what you are going through now, which is that I'm going to persist putting in more money, is not escalation of commitment? Do you see yourself sort of saying, I just taught this in class. How do I know I am not doing the same thing in my business?
Honestly, you don't know. And that's the thing that I think about is I am trying to frame this is this a life that is worth living? So a lot of the logics that we have come from decision theory in and where we imagine that there's these different alternatives that we have, except for a lot of these alternatives that we have don't exist. I cannot regrow myself. I can't make multiple of me's. And so because of that, I have to view myself as like, hey, I am just trying to do the best that I possibly can in any given moment. And yes, it's foolish. I understand all of the foolishness behind it. But there is a lot of things in life that are very, very foolish that a lot of people don't believe in as well. And it might be escalation commitment. It's very probably the case, but I don't know. This is a challenge with entrepreneurship. I don't think you know what the answer is. You never know.
And I think in that sense also, I think I've become humbler in my teaching because when I see a student sort of not have the answers, I don't hesitate now to tell them that's okay. I don't have all the answers either. I know you want me to have all the answers, but I don't. And it's okay if we both don't have all the answers. So thank you for your candor, David. But let me ask you this: 9 to 5, 5 to 9, videos online, online presence. How do you maintain work-life balance? I don't know if you're a parent, but you're certainly a husband,
Absolutely.
an
No,
entrepreneur.
I,
And oh
I,
yeah, you
I
said you are a parent. So how do you maintain work-life balance?
Yeah, no, I've got two kids, and that's why everything that it looks like that I'm doing is rinky dinky, and I'm trying to do the best that I possibly can with the resources that I have. I want to show you my stand. You probably all think that I have some professional setup, um, but I want to show you my setup. Just so you know, this is what I'm using. I have got a can of soup on a cereal box. Um, and I try I try not to take any of this seriously, and it is really weird when I'm like got a video up, like I'm walking and my neighbors are like honking their horn when I they're like, "Hey," and I'm talking on the phone. I'm like, "Hi." The whole thing is very embarrassing, and I am normally most of you don't know this, but I'm a very, very shy, introverted person. But I try not to take it as seriously as I think we take ourselves, right? Like I think we get so caught up with thinking about, um, is this the right thing? And all that. No one knows, right? If we just go with it and just figure it out as we go. I mean, I'm sure my grandparents certainly did not want to get out in front of a train and stop a train to sell them blueberries, but they figured it out.
So David, I mean, we are getting towards the end of the conversation. So let me take you to where we started, part-time entrepreneurship. I mean, you don't have all the answers, so why do it? I mean, you have a day job that pays well, good reputation. It's fulfilling in many ways, right? A professor's life is very, solid middle class, highly fulfilling. And why then do this other thing that seems to only create more anxiety, nervousness, work, tension, stress, even if you try not to take yourself seriously? I mean, there's still, why?
Wow. That is a question that many of us ask ourselves. I think if you're going to do this, you're going to ask yourself every single day. Um, Honestly, there's no answer. I think that's why I try to relegate to that this is it's part insanity. The whole thing is completely insane, and nobody's going to make sense of it except for you are. And the other part is that it's charity. I'm doing this because I know that there's a problem that exists in this world. And yes, I am scared of what people are going to view and think online. I'm scared of people online. People are strange. All those kind of things. But I also know that there's a really, really important problem to solve. Um, I think I could be trying to be part of this solution. Um, that's not a great answer. I wish maybe part of it is that one day I hope that this will turn into a Jeff Bezos moment and they'll be watching. You guys will be watching this in 25 years and saying, I knew that guy. But part of it is that there's complete irrationality to it. And there's no good explanation.
And later in the class, in about 3 weeks, we will be talking about Jeff Bezos and the drive from Texas to Seattle when he was typing the business plan and all that. So for the company that eventually became Amazon. So thank you for bringing up Jeff Bezos. But David, my last question to you, and let me also call upon any students who might want to ask a question. Anyone, please feel free to raise your hand. We would love for you to ask questions. But
Yeah,
my
don't be afraid. It's no biggie.
Okay. My last question to you, David, is as a professor, as an entrepreneur, as someone who's come a long way from, where you grew up to sort of what you do now, what is one advice you would like to share with students, juniors, maybe seniors about to graduate, thinking about entrepreneurship, but not sure which direction to go, a lot of family pressure to, in some cases to go, have a stable job, work for a large corporation. What's your sort of advice, career life advice for young students?
So I'm a real big fan of sort of this internet celebrity that I really like, Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if you've seen any of his stuff, but um, when the first time you watch him, you think, "Oh, this guy is like a shyster." But I've listened to him long enough. I kind of like what he says, but you have one life to live, and you might have different religious beliefs and whether that is true or not, but this life at this moment. Um, why are you going to be scared of what other people are going to think and say about you when you have one life to live? When I'm 90 years old, or now with the current technology that we have, probably 120 years old, I'm going to look back and I'm going to say, I gave it as much as I possibly can give it, and I solved, or I tried to solve a hard problem. And I think that's all I can ask. And I'm going to have a lot of regrets along the way, but I tried. I think that's it.
That's wonderful advice, David. Yeah, I tried, and I think yeah, I think that says a lot. Thank you, David, for your time, for your candor, and I owe you a drink next time we are together at Academy of Management. A drink for being so generous with your insights and time with our students. Thank you, and
All
best
right.
wishes for your venture.
All right. Thank you. Do appreciate it. Bye, everybody. Good luck with all your stuff.
And students, that's the end of the class. So thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.